(106) is a blank page. If you find any blank page, it's fine. But 106 is the one that's quite further to the back there. Maybe I'll give you an overview of what it will look like when we're done, okay? So I'm breaking it into investing and loans and mortgages, so half and half, okay? So that's kind of, when you're copying, make sure you keep that in mind, okay? It's a stubborn book at this point, right? That corner just doesn't want to flatten now. Okay. So investing, first of all, at the very top, I'm going to do this. Everything revolves around this. The future value, whether it be your amount that you have invested or the amount that you're paying back to the bank, always is comprised of principal and interest. It's blended, okay? So this concept has never really changed, except for when we use the TVM solver. We call this often the present value, right? And future value, stuff like that. Okay, so investing. When you invest, I will call it this: total principal invested. I'm going to call this TP, present value, plus N times PMT. So I'm using TVM solver terminology here. Total interest earned because when it's investing, you're earning, right? I'm going to call this TI is equal to, you go future value minus present value minus N times PMT. Or you may use this one, which is my favorite. If I can use this one, I will normally do it like that. And remember this, it's not a new formula, right? It just means that N has to be part of the whole numbers. Okay. And what I will do is I just box this all in like this, and I break it, I cut it like this. Okay, knowing that there's always a principal and interest portion of the investment. All of this combined is called the future value, or if you want to call it A, which is what we started off with a compound interest formula, future value. Okay. So it's still P and I, but this is, I'm focusing on the total. I don't know if you noticed I am focusing on that. And let's say I give you all of this and you're like, you know what, Mr. Dixon, what I have on my formula sheet is fine. I get it. This is adding too much right now in the mix. You just forget about this. Right? I don't want to confuse you. This is just an overview, okay? If you want partial amounts, okay? Only figuring out first X number of years. right? Most of it stays the same, but I don't call it TP, I call it P. So what's the only difference between this formula and the one I just gave you up here? You see N, right? This is saying whatever is in your NNTVM solver, it's the whole thing. This is going to depend on years times PY, right? So if it's 2 years and it's a monthly, then this would be 24, right? You'd replace this with 24. I will add that to our formulas in a bit. So this is I would be interest from the first all the way to the nth payment. Okay, and that's it. And I cut this again, and I think I'm just gonna say on the side here, N is years times PY, lowercase n. And at any time, because it's partial now, right? We're first 2 years, first 3 years, whatever. At any time, the combination of this will be given to you by balance n, right? Let's say you have a 10-year investment considered, but you want to know, hey, what about 4 years? After 4 years, how much will I have? Balance n. And the two portions of that will be determined with these two. Okay, because at any given moment, there's some money you put in, and at the same time, some interest you've earned at that time. So the balance you have at that amount comprises of these two. Does that make sense? I hope so. If I could read your brains, I would, but I can't. Okay, so the hole right here is my halfway mark. I'm gonna just cut it right about there. And then now we're gonna talk loans. You know what? It's not included here is the rate of return. All of that stuff is part of investing. So I didn't know it was going to be too busy. So that's still there, right? So loans, mortgages. There's something called total principal. So this is the same thing as above. No, here you pay, right? Total principal paid. You're paying back the loan. So if it's the total, this is the easiest one of all. Total principal is really just the present value, right? If you borrow 120,000, you're going to pay 120,000 back. Like you're going to pay that principal back. Okay, so no news there. But this one is total interest paid. This is where it gets a little interesting. This is the most common. We usually focus on this here when it comes to loans. Total interest would be N times PMT minus present value. What do we call, like if you take all of the payments times the PMT, this is what we paid the bank, right? This is what, if you ever, right, total paid to bank. And so usually 100% of the time, you're going to pay back more than what you originally borrowed, right? So that difference is your interest, okay? You can also use this or sum of interest 1 to n. and of course new, right? Always there, always there. And so let's box these in. And cut it. I want you to see the principal and the interest portion there. And I would consider this whole thing, both of these combined would be N times PMT, right? Because this is how much you paid the bank in total, right? Some of it was actually towards the loan. Some of it was just the interest that they made, okay? Partial amounts, same as before. For principal, you can use this one. You can actually use that one for loans. Or principal would be PV minus balance at n number of payments. And the interest, I call it I only, would be like this. And where n is going to be years times PY. And again, and at any given moment, this would be balance n. Hold on. Interest and principal balance. Nope. No. Get rid of this. My bad. Must be Monday. So that's how it works. That's how it works. So there's a different way to do interest. But I would say this, to figure out the interest earned, if n is a whole number, which is most of the time, you just use your sum of interest formula function personally, right? And if it's the only time where you have to use your formula really is if n is not a whole number. All right, so this is summary. This one, you could have used it. You know how there's questions like how much have you actually paid off on your loan? Like what's the amount you've actually paid off? Then you use PRN, but you don't have to use PRN. You can just use this one here instead. This is the one that I've been using. PRN, I'm not a big fan when it comes to investments. It actually doesn't work. It doesn't tell you how much principal you paid. Okay, so if this one is throwing you off, then just stick with this one maybe. This is the one that I was gonna maybe. My calculator. Oh yeah, I have another one. So let's walk through a scenario here. I'm making this up, okay? But let's say you have a loan. You borrow 15 grand. So I'm just gonna set it up, and this is gonna tell us what's happening here. Is there? I don't know if there's room on the back side of this. Is there? back of 106. There's test review checklist. If you want to write this down somewhere in that neighborhood, that's fine. But let's say we're borrowing 15,000. We have monthly payments, and let's say it's monthly compounding. We want to pay it off. Let's figure out our payment. Let's say the interest rate is 7.5%, and we want to have this paid off over 6 years. So 6 times 12, that's 72. You can follow me with this, just with your calculators at least. I think it helps making connections, right? So this would be 72, 7.5, 15,000. I will figure out the rest. So we figure out the payment. The payment ends up being 259.35. Okay. If a question asks you principal paid off in the first 2 years, right? Let's say the question said, how much have you actually paid off in the first 2 years? You could use that principal function in this case. So we're going to go, I'm going to quit this screen. I'm going to go apps, finance. Right there it is, principal. So if it's 2 years in this particular case, it would be 2 times 12, right? So we're talking 24th payment, right? So principal from the 1st to the 24th. So you've actually paid off 4,273.64. Okay, that's how much you've actually paid from your own money, because this payment doesn't completely go towards paying off your loan. Only part of it does every month, right? So you've actually paid off this much. Can I ask you something? How much have you paid in total so far? So far, you've paid 24 payments of 259, correct? 35. That would be 24 times 259, 35. You technically paid so far, right? Total paid in 2 years. Out of that 6,224, this is how much actually went towards paying off your loan, this amount. So I'm going to say this. The principal portion would be 4,273.64, which means that there's an interest portion, right? How much will the interest have been? There are 2 ways of doing that at this point. We just take this minus that, right? That will have to be the interest, so that's one way of doing it. But we could also just use this, right? Sum of interest for the first 24 months. It's 1950.80. Okay, that's technically, so if I added these two up right now, if I go 1950.80, right, plus 4273.64, it'll be close or exactly that amount. In this case, it's very close. I'm missing, or was it 44 earlier? No, it was 40, right? But I'm very close. So I used principal, right? This was principal from the 1st to the 24th, and this was interest from the 1st to the 24th. But there's also another way of figuring this out, which is principal would be present value minus balance of, in this case, 24. The present value is 15 grand. Minus, let's figure out what the balance owing would be after 24 months. Oops. Let's try that again. Apps, finance, balance. Nope. Apps finance balance is 9. After 24, that'd be 10,726.36. So after 24 months, you still owe this much, which means that, right, the difference between these two is how much you've actually paid off, right? The difference between these two. So I'm just going to go minus 15,000, and that is 4,273.64. So this answer almost, it is exactly the same in this case, right? So you choose how you want to use it. Do you want to use this function, or do you just want to always take what you started with, what you owed them at the very beginning, minus how much you still owe after 24 months, but the principal stays the same? That's why accountants make a lot of money, because they and anybody in the financial sector, right? Like there's a lot of this is can we make sure that we understand that this will be partial, right? We know that it's a 6-year loan in this case. We only figured out 2 years worth of it, right? So it's kind of like in between. Like after 2 years, this is your situation. You will have paid off this much and paid this much interest, almost $2,000 in interest, right? And then if you want to do the total interest, total paid, wouldn't you have to? That's the present value, right? And at the end of the loan, you will in fact have paid off principal. This is the principal. In fact, the 15 grand. You will have paid the entire 15 grand off. You better, or else I'll come after you, right? Total interest. In this case, you have choices. You can use this one because it's a whole number. 1 to 72, right? And let's figure that out. That's 3,673.32. So you've actually paid the bank, right? The 15,000 plus the interest, which is, we can just do mental math there, right? It's 18,673.32. This is how much you've paid the bank in total. You paid off the principal and the interest, which is the total amount. How can we get this number here, guys? What's the formula to get this number? You get 10 bonus marks on the test if I'm just kidding. What's the formula to get this? Because remember, you paid them the loan plus the interest. That is N times PMT, right? You made 72 payments of 259.35. Let's do that. 72 times 259.35. That better amount to that. It'll be maybe off by a little bit, but not much. Oh, we're off just by a tad. Okay. You see that these two numbers they should be the same or very close, right? So at any given moment, there's always a principal portion and the interest portion. And this would be, in this case, because it's a loan, this would be the A, right? The amount that has both of them combined in the future. Okay. So you know what? This right here is often invisible to us. We don't think of that. We just think of, hey, I want my loan. What's the payment, bank? Oh, your payment is $259.35 a month, which means that when you're done paying it off, you're going to have paid off a whole lot more than the 15 grand. So that's kind of how it all knits together. For tomorrow, If you go to 107 here, to be honest, I don't think this is everything. I just brainstormed when I made this, right? But just remember your simple interest, no compounding, nothing, right? Compound interest. Remember that for simple interest, time needs to be in years, right? Always convert. Okay. Rule of 72, rate of return, difference between simple and compound. Simple is linear, compound is exponential, right? Can I just say something? Not always is the simple interest, not always is compound better than simple. It could be that at the beginning, simple interest is actually better. Like if you ever have a graph that looks like this, there's a time where simple interest is actually better in this case, right? For the first X number of years, but then there's a time where it surpasses it, and then it's better to go compound, right? TBM solver can't find interest where n is a decimal, right? So you need n to always be part of the whole numbers. N is years times py, so years is n divided by py. Investments with or without regular payments. Low risk versus high risk portfolios. Rate of return is basically earnings divided by investments times 100. I would say this: if the quiz, if even when we corrected it, if it made sense to you, and you have formulas, you should be okay. All right. There will be no other units on there. It's all finance only. Okay. The backs. This one focuses a little bit more on loans and mortgages. Expect the ratios, the financial ratios you just did a quiz of. So some of you might have to add the formulas and maybe watch the video again. And if you have a question, just come and see me. But you need to know that. You also need to review leasing versus purchasing, pros of and cons of buying and renting, that kind of stuff. And tomorrow, after the test, I'm going to give you 3 provincial exams from the past to start working through, getting ready for the exam. I just need you to do this, okay? You're going to write your test. You're going to feel like I'm done. I don't have anything left. You need to start working on the one I'm going to assign you one of them. You're going to need to start working on that Tuesday after school already. Because if you bank everything in like class time, you're going to be surprised how little time we have, right? So start working through those when I give you that those exams, right? That's everything, guys.